Welcome to Every Step Podcast. I'm Krystyna Weston.
And I'm Judith Beck.
Every Step is the podcast where career and life meet.
With a new guest every episode, we explore the gutsy issues affecting everyone in the workplace. Today, we welcome Jacqui Clarke. Jacqui is a personal wealth and money management expert and the author of Stop Worrying About Money. It's everything you need to get your house in order and take back control. You know, Jacqui, over my years of running an executive search company, I dealt with candidates who were making quite large salaries. But the one thing that I noticed is that the more they made, the more they spent. And then when they had a problem in their life's journey, like a redundancy, panic would set in because they didn't save and they couldn't support their lifestyles for more than a few months. And that made them desperate to get another high-paying job. So, Jacqui, what have you seen as the most common money no-no that people have done over the years? Is there anything that stands out?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And Judith, I love that you share that story because not dissimilar to yourself, one of the things I did earlier on in my career was take care of people through outplacement. So when they'd come to you and they were looking at potentially a redundancy with a big corporate role, I would be contacted in the accounting firm to help people with the transition of their role. So that classic thing where they've sort of been on the treadmill, if you like, and they've been earning more and more money, and then they're contemplating what to do now. And the anchor, if you like, or the cuffs of the big salary job holds people back from making, you know, the best choices for them. So to step back from that, I just like the story because it reminds me, and I do write about this in the book actually, is that type of experience in helping people be able to sort of lift up from that. But the three biggest money mistakes that I see people make, the first one is actually doing nothing about money. So basically ignoring it. The second one is actually not understanding people's baseline costs. So people come to me who don't actually know what it costs to open their front door at home. So there's no idea what's going out each month. And the third one, which changes over different sort of decades, is the wearing and driving your money, which is people tend to buy into what's fashionable, what we need to be wearing, and also driving fancy cars. So they're the top three mistakes.
They're expensive mistakes.
They are.
Very expensive.
Most common.
You know, that's interesting because that's often something I noticed, especially in that 30s range, you know, moving up that corporate ladder, that the need to buy the designer clothes and the fancy cars, that type of thing. And I used to say, have you bought a house? Like, you know, put it into property, not because I never interviewed. I wouldn't have a clue when I interviewed executives, and either would the people that interviewed the executives about what the label was on their jacket. And as long as they looked professional and it was nice quality, looked nice, they wouldn't have a clue if you had a $5,000 suit on or a $500 suit. And that did not get you the job. And bags, you know, handbags and briefcases or whatever. And I used to always think that, and I raised my hand. I was guilty in my 30s. Like, hello.
Yes.
And I wish I had that money back that I spent on stuff that I might have worn once, and cars stuff, you know, that kind of stuff, because they don't, and especially now, they don't go up in value at all. And what a waste. And you get sort of talked into things that could be a tax deduction.
Yes. Yes. I'm used to telling people what they are. But actually, it goes full circle as well. Because the reality is, if you're spending money that way, maybe you haven't done the most critical thing, which is set a financial goal. So if we go right back in my 30s, 40s, and now in 50s, is setting financial goals to me has been the most powerful thing to influence my habits, which is like, what are the choices that I'm making as a result of that goal? So if that goal is, as I say, to spend 3 or 6 months in Europe, or to pay down debt, or to buy an investment property, I have to make some decisions. They might be sacrifices, but maybe they're for the better. And are they, again, they're aligned with my goals. So all of the things that I do, how I work, who I spend time with, they're all sort of tied into that. Financial goal setting is just one aspect for everyone, but a lot of your decisions have a financial element to them.
Yeah, a lot of them do, and a lot of them are driven too by psychological and behavioral issues. So often, to the examples that you were using, people do things to make them look good or to create a perception of something that they're not. But that all comes with a massive cost. Even doing nothing comes at a really, really, really big cost.
Yeah, no, that's the thing, Krystyna. I've certainly seen, look, people ignore cash flow in businesses at their peril. And it's very easy to be good at doing something. You could be the creative, you could be the ideas person, you could be the person who brings the money in. But if you don't have an eye on your bottom line and the actual cash flow in your business, you're unlikely to make your first BAS payment, possibly miss your third one, forget about your PAYG and your superannuation costs for your staff. And before you know it, you're in a whole lot of debt. I see it all the time. That's why most businesses fail as well. But not keeping an eye on the doing nothing about the cash, like it'll all work out thing, doesn't quite work.
No,
and I
think,
the business owner compared to, say, the executive earning a salary and wage, they're similar issues but different. I think for the executive, they've got the regular income coming in, but what they suffer from in the same way through ignoring it is things like expense creep, which you think about how you spent money in your 20s to how you spend money now, or even if you sort of compare your decades. But in your 20s, you think back to, and I often use the example of the type of wine that you might have purchased. So think back to university days. What was the type of wine you were drinking, if you were even drinking wine then? But let's say you started with a $7 or $8 bottle of something. And then as you matured into your late 20s and started on your career journey, you may have spent $15 on wine. And then as you've got into your 30s, it gets to $30 bottle of wines. In your 40s, it's 40, and there's kind of no end to it. But
when you get in your 60s, you go back to the $6 bottle of wine.
The wisdom that we all share. And that's actually why I wrote the book, was to be able to share my 50 years of money wisdom with people, to say, imagine making those choices and what impact they'll have on your goals. And yes, financial goals underpin a lot of goals, but just how significant that impact could be.
How do you get people to pay attention? Because it's like no one wakes up in the morning and says, hey, I'm going to look at my insurance, or hey, I'm going to think about money, because they're not the fun, from a lot of people, they're not the fun things to deal with. I mean, some people obviously enjoy money and finances, but the majority of us don't wake up in the morning and kind of think about those things. How do you engage people in having positive conversations around money, and meaningful conversations that actually result in good outcomes?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Krystyna. I think one of the best places to start, and I start with this, is trying to understand what your money story is first. So spenders and savers, we're all different, but actually understanding what your behavior to money, where it came from. So think back to when you were growing up. Did your parents save money? Were they conservative? Were they spendthrifts? Have you either adopted that behavior or been so frightened by it that you've changed your habits as well? So I guess I've mentioned goals quite early in our discussion today, but you can't actually really build any sound goal without considering the financial implications of it. So I think that's how you engage people. And in fact, one of the things I'm very focused on is encouraging people in relationships to take responsibility around money matters in their home. And first, you have to sort of understand what your relationship to money is. And again, it's like cash flow, or ignore that at your peril. But actually having the time to think through, how did I get here? Where would I like to get to? I need to engage in, whether it's uncomfortable or not, I need to engage in a money discussion. And if you're someone in the household who's not paying attention to money, you need to pay attention to it, because that is that represents a significant risk to you now and in the future. And like something happens to your partner or in your life, and you're not clear on what all the parameters of that are, again, so you're ignoring it at your peril. So I think, Krystyna, maybe it's a bit of carrot and stick around the money thing. It's not a sexy conversation, but I think in a really positive way, it can drive great outcomes when it comes to what your goals or your vision might be for your life, for your business, for your well-being. Like, I think about our financial well-being as such a significant factor in everything we all do. How do you enhance your well-being by just nailing this side of it?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think a big problem is in the people that I've seen over the years is that there's this false sense of security. And it kind of goes into this, what you were saying before, Jacqui, that you from an economical point of view. So if you're a small business and you've got suppliers that you need to pay, there's no point delaying that payment. And, you know, like in my businesses that I've had over the years with suppliers or people that, you know, owed money, I used to always say pay those people when that invoice comes in, because it's a false sense of security by you holding it off. Pay your tax when it's due. Pay your BAS or whatever. Like, we always paid that right away, because there's no point delaying the inevitable. And it's quite simple. If you've got money coming in, you pay what you owe. And it had a two-prong effect as well, because when you pay your suppliers quickly, you become their best client, and they do things for you right away before they'll do it for other people. And so that was especially, and I noticed when as we did several renovations with offices and things over the years, and you paid the trades right away, because if you pay the trades right away, they're going to come back tomorrow, because trades are one of the groups that are constantly chasing money from people for work that they've done. And if you pay them right away, they love you and they come back, they finish your job. And that's important for your own business's profitability as well. So I'd see that sort of in businesses, false sense as a security. We see it with individuals as well, with things like pay as you go and paying things off, you know, in the future, credit card debt. And it always comes, it will always catch up with you if you don't have the money.
Yeah, if you don't have the money now, you can't afford to buy it.
Well, I mean, so Krystyna, that's actually not how a lot of people operate, though.
Absolutely.
And what's changed is the flexibility around payment options. Like, you would think back to what I used to call the Harvey Norman, which is when you could walk into a store and you could buy a whole house full of furniture and not pay for it for 18 months or up to 3 years. Now we've got Afterpay. I mean, I could easily click the wrong button on an online purchase and be set up for Afterpay with some type of one of the Afterpays. It's not fair to blame Afterpay, as in there's lots of different options now, but you could easily be in a payment arrangement for something where you've got the cash today. But I think it's really important that people get back to being able to extinguish their debts as and when they fall due, but also recognising that the impact of those cash outflows will have on those future decisions that you'd like to be making. Yeah. But relying on credit is not a good thing. And probably the first thing I focus on with people is actually making sure that we manage credit card debt down to zero, essentially, and start working with what they've got rather than what they might be getting in the future.
Yeah, and understanding productive debt versus unproductive debt.
Well, that's right. The other thing you think about, talked about people wearing and driving their money. It's actually really easy to buy expensive clothes. And I think when you're under 30, particularly, you can't maybe afford a house yet, but you can afford a nice car and you can afford nice clothes and handbags and golf clubs, whatever it might be. So it's sort of like that short-termism. I can have this now. But the reality is, if you don't lease some super fancy car and you invest that money or save it, what things could look like for you down the track could be substantially different. And these are decisions we all need to make. I'm talking to 55-year-old senior executive women who have got significant debt on a home. They've got all the cars leased in the house. There's so much cash going out the door. There's that big clump, if you like, that's committed every month. And there's not a lot of wiggle room when you get loaded up like that. And this is that sort of expense creep I was talking about. I sort of talked a little bit about the bottle of wine. But it's the same with everything. You think today how many subscriptions you've got. When Netflix was the first on the market, we all eventually got onto Netflix, whereas now I would say most households would have no less than 5 subscriptions. And I'm talking, you've got your Spotify's, your Stans, your Optus. In fact, I had to take up the Optus subscription this past week so that I could watch the soccer for the games that weren't being televised on 7+. Like, just extraordinary. And I've got a note to go and terminate that subscription after 1 month. But a lot of people just let these things roll. And before you blink, if you're not looking at that credit card bill every month closely, you'll see there's a whole stream of subscriptions, for example, going out.
And that's a real trap. We've just done an audit of all our subscriptions. It was because one of our credit cards, it bounced because it had been a new date and we hadn't done whatever we were meant to do. And I went, I didn't even know we had this subscription. Why are we paying for this? So we've just done a massive audit and rationalized our music subscriptions and worked out we could get greater efficiencies by managing our storage and our emails a little bit different. And, we've saved ourselves a few $100s. But I guess I've also grown up, talk about your money language and how you grew up in your family. I've grown up in a family where things were very frugal. I'm the child of war parents, Polish parents that had challenges during the war and grew up very, very poor. So I've kind of grown up with this very frugal, and I think, Judith, you've also grown up with a very kind of frugal mentality. So whilst we did some crazy things in our youth, I've been very, very focused on, money goals. And so it's often hard to put yourself in other people's shoes when your money language is different and understand what motivates other people. I think it's really important to actually put yourself in those shoes and so that we can support them to make better financial decisions and understand the history of their money language.
Actually, it's a really great point too, because you think about it's like your money story is a bit like your CV, but from childhood. So you think back to, like, my greatest experience was with my grandparents who were post-war in Australia, so post-depression, where they saved everything, including the cardboard of the cereal box was used as the paper for the business to write the notes on when the calls came in. My grandparents were builders and plumbers, so people would ring to get a job done, and my grandmother would write that information down on the Kellogg's
beautiful
packet. We had Bubble and Squeak. We always had the meal from the roast dinner on the Sunday night would then become dinner on the Monday night, Tuesday if you were really lucky, or fried up with an egg or whatever. That's not so much tradition hasn't continued. And when you add an Uber Eats into our worlds, the things that we are affluent in Australia, and there are lots of ways to spend. But coming back to that sort of childhood CV, all the TV shows you watch, all the things that have influenced our habits, definitely an important part of the flavour for where we're at today. The question is, what do you need to change?
That's exactly. And the thing is if you think about, the ones that are in their 20s and 30s and everything that they see, they're influenced by a lot more than what we got influenced. I mean, I remember my mother would say, that was back in the days when you're keeping up with the Joneses. Did you ever hear that? Keeping up with the Joneses. Well, really, the Joneses didn't have any more money than anybody else. They just showed it off better. But people's views were you had to be a certain way. And now they're seeing everything on social media that they have to look a certain way, wear certain clothes, that kind of things. And I understand that when you're in that age group, you're living for today, and you're thinking you only live once, but I guess I would probably say to people who are in those age ranges now, just do your grocery list. I have the saying, do your grocery list, write it down, everything you spend money on, because it's not the big things usually, it's the small things that add up. It's those little things that you're spending every day that you could cut out very easily to help you get back on track. And the reason why I say the grocery list is because you come home and you go, how in the heck did I spend $300 on groceries? And you start looking down and everything's just a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and it adds up. And same thing in a small business. You look at your overheads at the end of the month and you go, how could we have possibly spent that much? And then you look at the list and you think, oh, because we spent, money on this stationery and that stationery and this stuff we didn't really need.
Yes, that's absolutely right. I think that exercise of understanding what it costs to open your front door at home is really critical. So
Absolutely.
from whether it's the mortgage or the rent, the electricity, the council rates, the water rates, then the subscriptions, then your insurance, then the food. When you start to acknowledge or work out what all of that is, you work out very quickly then what the opportunity is for saving, or what the opportunity, or where you need to reconsider where you shop, how you shop, how you plan your meals throughout the week, or if indeed you plan at all. Because we have this huge element of discretionary spend or potential discretionary spend that's shrinking each time this open your front door cost is expanding. So if you're planning a holiday, how do you set aside cash for that? And people tend to forget, or they get a bonus and that's where it goes. Because, one of the things I've definitely seen a lot is when people do get bonuses, they tend to, or the classic one is the tax refund is already spent.
So is the bonus. So is the pay rise. Yeah. So is that commission payment, whatever your business model is. Yeah, it's already spent.
No one's ever saying, I'm putting that into an investment. People are saying, no, that's my reward. I earned that. The reward is in the planning around the goal that gets you to a place you really want to be, rather than just having that tangible thing now that'll probably be out of date in no time at all. So I just mentioned that because I think it's a great point, Judith, around the business and having a review of costs. Likewise at home, understanding what it costs to open the front door. And I call that open your front door, but also your baseline costs, is actually recognizing what they all are. Because until you own that, you can't make any change.
That's exactly right.
It goes full circle. Why do you want to know that? Because you want to know where the flex is, where the trade-offs are, where the essential items are, so that you can challenge yourself to create a bit of space to perhaps create an investment or an income stream that's not dependent on you showing up to an office every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is so important. They say that women over 50, there's a big number that increase in homelessness.
Yes.
And I wonder if it's because a lot of times you don't know, and I know people who don't know exactly what the bills are. And a couple of years ago, I did a home manual, which I call my house manual, because often a lot of times I didn't pay attention to what the cost was at the grocery store and stuff like that. And so I did a home manual mainly for the fact that if something happened to one of us, we'd know, where is the internet? What's the code? What's the password? How much are we spending? What are the subscription? And it was a really now we have a manual, home manual. So God forbid anything happens to one of us, but at least if it does, the other person can go to that home manual and know exactly what it is, where the money's going and where it's at. But going through that exercise, to your point, Jacqui, finding out subscriptions that we didn't need, costs that we were spending that we really didn't need to do anymore, and things like that, and also reevaluating insurance policies, because the insurance policies will continue on and they keep going up, but if you get another quote somewhere else, you could be saving hundreds and hundreds of dollars by changing your insurance policies over. So little things like that I was finding in this long grocery list of expenses.
I mean, that's brilliant, Judith. You should patent that. I think that there's a lot of value, and actually you open that by talking about homelessness of women, which I think is a really serious issue. And there's a number of reasons or number of factors that influence that. But the two that probably stand out the most to me are twofold, or tenfold really. One is that financial literacy is dropping in Australia. So a lot of people are delegating financial responsibility to the point where their own financial literacy is deteriorating. So the first thing that's happening is people aren't actually aware of what the costs are in their household, or what I would refer to as baseline costs. So it's important that you don't delegate and you actually are aware. The other thing is, if you're not used to having financial conversations, naturally the language about them deteriorates. And so again, how do you rebuild your financial literacy? Well, the main way is to actually contemplate financial decisions. So that's really important. And the other thing is that women typically, or women and men, are getting divorced in their 40s, or certainly a round of divorce tends to occur after people's 40s. And if it's post-children, or not necessarily with children, but there may be, historically, men have been a breadwinner. They may take a greater share of the wealth, or they may continue to be able to grow wealth after the marriage has broken down. So women are getting a smaller share. Like women have less super because they had their child-rearing years out of the workforce. All of these factors are influencing how women become homeless. In fact, one of the examples I talk about in my book is one of Sydney's famous chefs. His wife is now living in Housing Commission. And it was just an extraordinary tale where they were running the business. He died suddenly. And naturally, like again, to the conversation we're having with Judith around paying the bills hadn't been paid. The wash up of closing the restaurant out and other dealings meant that there was actually not a lot left. And so the widow in this case was left to fend for herself, essentially, without any financial backing. And I think that if in that circumstance, there had been a much greater appreciation of costs that were going out, money that was coming in, and at some point being able to make a decision where I need to set aside something for us for our future, that might not have happened. So it's really sad that this has happened, and I think that there is still a significant amount of homelessness coming our way, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think it's not just women. I mean, I think women do have often take on the delegate the responsibility to their partners, and then, as you said, as a result of a divorce or a separation or a breakdown or a death, they find themselves drowning in knowledge and not having any comprehension, or discovering there's so many debts. I've also seen a lot of circumstances where there might be a husband and wife business team, and the husband is he goes out and does the work, could be a tradie, he goes out and does the work, and the wife is the bookkeeper and she manages things. And then something happens and the wife wasn't onto it, or one or the other of the partners has a gambling habit that is undisclosed. And then it all just becomes terribly, terribly tragic in terms of trying to unravel those kind of scenarios.
Yes, and often where I get involved, and I do go through financial infidelity with people, and this is something that we all need to be aware of, because financial infidelity occurs in relationships. There can be trust. It just means that somebody spends money without your knowledge. And it's the first sign is usually when there's a few extra packages arriving at the front door. And if as a couple you've set a financial goal, and all these packages keep coming, at some point you have to say, hang on a minute, have we agreed to kind of doing that? Is that in line with what the goals are that we've set? It's not about budgeting somebody down to the last dollar, but actually making sure that people's habits are in check. And gambling, any form of addiction, these are risks. I mean, gambling is probably the biggest one that I see that happens in typically affluent households where a partner has an interest in gambling. And the question is it a Saturday thing where they spend a couple hours putting money on the horses, or is it sort of much bigger than that? And these things tend to grow and influence lifestyle. And it's important that you get them in check, or it is upon you to be aware of these things and to call them out and have a really good conversation about money when you start to identify these things happening. So something just to be careful of is financial infidelity. And it maybe sounds worse than it is. It can start as really innocent purchases that maybe fall outside of what we've set as a financial goal as a couple, but it can be quite significant. And when people have separate bank accounts and they have different credit cards, all of which are kind of off to the side and you don't have any knowledge of, I see those as a significant risk to the relationship and particularly to your financial security, which is something that no doubt is on people's minds.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in the age of blended families where people are, two professionals. I've been in that situation myself. Two professionals come together with children from other relationships, and then you're trying to build a financial future together. And this whole being open about money, and if people are making those incidental purchases, I was just on Temple and Webster and I just had to get whatever it was, and before you know it, there's all this stuff turning up. Sometimes that's a symptom of emotional issues, of other kind of psychological issues around unhappiness that they're trying to get a fix by buying stuff. And it's the same with going shopping. You know, you're happy for a moment because you bought all this wonderful stuff, and then you might come home and then you're miserable because you realize what you've done. So there are a lot of psychological issues tied up with money.
And that's why I think approaching, when you become aware of a level of financial infidelity in your relationship, to approach that gently with your partner, to try and unpack how we got here and what we could do. What other things do we need to address? It's not just about stopping the spending, actually. It's about other things, like it may be their genuine happiness or just their overall health. You know, how do they get support?
Yeah. Judith and I talk a lot about getting a mentor. So just in career issues, and it's one of our big themes, it's don't try and do things yourself. Oh. And I guess this is a classic one. You know, how valuable is it to have a money mentor?
Yes. Oh, look, couldn't agree more. One of the things that I always focus on is your personal finance village. And I think a money mentor, a coach, an accountant, a lawyer, potentially a financial advisor, these people all form part of your personal finance village. And to be fair, money can be, and particularly in blended families, of which I'm in one, it can be really sensitive and incredibly emotional. And you think back to the start of our chat today, talking about your money story and what money behaviors, you know, you might have a partner who has completely different money behaviors to you. And so someone, for example, who gambles or, you know, spends $20 a week on the trots or whatever it is, whatever that expression is. So it's bringing all of that together. But if you have having a personal finance village is having people around you that can help you make non-emotional decisions about money choices. But the other thing is to make sure that you have qualified people around you. And, you know, people like Melissa Caddick led her investors down the garden path because she produced this image of a successful professional and had fake qualifications. And I mentioned making sure that people have the right qualifications is make sure you do your homework on the people in your personal finance village. Make sure they have A, the experience, and B, the qualifications, and C, that you have good rapport with them. It's not okay necessarily just to settle for that mentor or that money manager that your spouse or partner uses. Make sure it's somebody that you can trust, that can be independent for you. So somebody who's got your back. It could be a family member as well. So I just mentioned this with maybe a little bit of hesitation, but I think naturally, if you're uncomfortable talking about money issues, which let's face it, a lot of people are, so you might naturally go to a family member who is in the financial services industry for a chat. I think that's okay, as long as they are appropriately qualified. And
that's probably the danger. That's probably a danger with family members. You're so close to them and you think, but they said they're qualified, and then you don't do the references that you would do as you normally would do because that's my family member and I trust them. And the reality is you almost need to check them out. I mean, you need to check them out even more because, you know, you're going to lose the family relationship if they don't do the right thing by you. But also there's an expectation from the family member, well, you should be dealing with me because I'm your family. But if they don't have qualifications, kind of like, well, you wouldn't go to a doctor for surgery if they didn't have a medical degree. So why would you put your life, your financial life, in the hands of someone who hasn't got the qualifications?
No,
that's a good talker.
And they need, so I say the family member, what is most important in your personal finance village is having independent advice. So I said non-emotional, but the and is independent advice, so that they're not tied or connected up with any particular, for example, the investment they might put you into or whatever it might be. They are independent so that they can help you sort of rise above it, if you like, to make the right decision for you. Yeah. And actually, maybe just to call out here to a story of someone I met not that long ago who had been in the situation where they had a tax advisor who was the advisor to their spouse, and they didn't have a great relationship, but they were quite successful in their own right, this individual. And then, unfortunately, because the relationship wasn't perhaps where it needed to be, there was a very bad decision made that cost them a fortune in tax because they didn't get the right advice. And it was almost laziness on behalf of the tax advisor, because their relationship was focused on one of the two people in the relationship. They sort of didn't place enough emphasis on the second relationship. And by doing so, they actually made the wrong decision and cost them, actually in this particular scenario, millions of dollars that they would otherwise not have had to pay in tax. And it was just to do with some stock options that came through an executive role. So it's important to make sure that you do choose your advisors and you don't settle just for the one that your partner has because it's convenient. Decide whether you've got a good relationship with them and that they've got your back.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I remember years ago, one of my worst investments was, and when I was young, that a boss that I had worked with talked us into investing in a movie. And so it was right after Crocodile Dundee, and that the success of that movie.
I remember those.
Yeah. So invested. It was double Jean-Claude Van Damme, Double Impact.
Yes, I remember when he came to Australia to film that.
Oh, anyway, it bombed. And anyway, it was a good learning experience for me at a young age, investing money into something that, I really didn't think about, and I really didn't, go to a professional advisor who knew more. It was kind of like, I got a great tip for you. Here's a great tip. And if you get in early, you'll make a lot of money, just like Crocodile Dundee did, right? And so you're all, these people, some people can be really good salespeople. And, Melissa Caddick, didn't she convince a lot of her friends and family that checked her out? They would have just gone, yeah. And I was grateful for making that mistake early.
Yes.
Because it set the tone for any investment. I never got into any investment.
So you haven't bought land in the metaverse. You haven't bought vanity NFTs.
No,
right.
Bricks and mortar.
That's the thing. I wrap that all up by saying, don't invest in something that you don't understand. Make sure you understand it before you get taken down a path by anyone. If you can't understand it, then
if you can't explain it, if you can't explain it,
walk away. That's exactly right.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So some final thoughts. Jacqui, we'll start with you. How do we stop worrying about money? What are the things that we can do to stop worrying about money?
It's a great way to wrap up. Look, I think the main thing is, in terms of stop worrying about money, is actually getting your house in order. There's number one, get your house in order. I think number two would be setting financial goals. And I think number three is making money a priority for you in the discussions that you have at home in terms of your relationships, not over the relationship, but actually prioritizing financial decisions in your life, I think will make a big difference to stopping worry.
Judith, what about you? What's your advice around how we stop worrying about money?
Well, I mean, I think if I was looking back, I'd be going, okay.
Sorry, and read my book.
That's number one. That's number one. Well, at the end of the day, listen to the people who have the experience and who've perhaps made mistakes too, so you don't do it again. But if it was me, if I was doing it again, it would be, first of all, pay your house off first. That's your top priority. Don't buy things for short-term buzz, that I've got to buy this because these things are fads. Don't waste money on fads and things that don't matter. I personally, what I do, like in my family, is we have a family budget, but we also had an individual spending allowance that I don't want to know every dollar that my husband spends money on. If he wants to go and spend money on, surfing magazines or something like that, or that, fine, spend them. And he doesn't want to know whether or not I'm going to go out and buy the latest. So it's kind of like have a portion that you can spend, that it's up to you how you spend it. And then you have a home budget, which is for the home. Yeah. And I think also a limit that if you go over, from a house point of view, if it's $1,000 and over, let's say, that you never spend a certain amount without discussing
Had
it.
a conversation.
But you know what your benchmark is. You know what your benchmark is. You set your benchmark. Anything over that, let's have a discussion and we'll talk about it. It's a joint decision. And I think
like financial authority in a business, right? It's up to this, whatever.
Is a
the
delegation matrix.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah,
exactly.
Great. It's really wise, Judith. I think it's brilliant. You would be an outlier, I will say.
Yeah, I think the biggest piece of advice is don't bury your head in the sand. I mean, I agree with everything that everybody has said. Don't bury your head in the sand. They can be emotionally challenging conversations to have, and we come up against a lot of our fears and, oh, I should trust that person. I shouldn't be asking the questions. They might think I'm questioning them. You've got to let go of all of that and take responsibility. And if it's daunting, if it's scary, if it's intimidating, find a money mentor, find somebody, what do you call it? A personal finance village, find somebody that you can talk to and bounce ideas off that has the right qualifications that can guide you appropriately. So Jacqui, thank you so much. It's been lovely chatting to you today about a challenging, I think it's a challenging conversation for a lot of people. It's easy to sit here and have this conversation, but I think for most people, when we start talking about money, it really churns them up and it pushes a lot of buttons for a lot of people. I think these are very important conversations to have. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you both for having me. It's been wonderful.
For more information about Every Step and our guests, head to everysteppodcast.com. To be notified of new podcasts, please subscribe via your favourite listening platform. And of course, follow us on social media and direct message us to share your ideas about guests or topics.